Hello and welcome. Today we bring you in a special treat. With me, we have Dr. Sorrel Brown, who has a PhD, and she's retired now. So this is the first time us interviewing somebody who has contributed to the literature in creating resources, but she was kind enough to come and talk to us today. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
Dr. Brown, I will not do a justice introducing you to our audience. So do you mind telling about yourself, a brief introduction of what you've done, who you are?
Certainly. I got my master's in soil science and then was hired as the first female agronomist by Iowa State University Extension back in the 1980. And so with that position, I worked in the field, so to speak, with farmers and agricultural dealers to help them with their crop problems and to extend the research that Iowa State University did that was applicable to what they could apply in their operations.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And audience, the reason I'm bringing Dr. Brown to you today is for this document, which you see in front of me right now. Dr. Brown, during her time at Iowa State University, in 2010, at the time of recording this video, that is almost 13 years ago, she ended up creating this small resource for 5-point, 4-point, many different Likert scale points. If you're creating a survey-based studies, some of these things could be very, very handy. And as you would see, for agreement, she has several options there. She's listed there as well for value, for relevance, for frequency, and then importance and quality and likelihood and so on and so forth. She's also divided them into dichotomous scales as well, and 3-point and 4-point scales. Sometimes we worry too much about that what we're going to do with the neutral in the between. So she's providing those 3, 4, 4, 5 point, 3 and 4 points and 5 points as well, and 7 points in this regard. I found it very useful. There are tons of other resources, but when we reach out to Dr. Brown to understand what is the story behind what made her do what she did in this regard in creating this excellent resource. And I'm sure the resource could be updated with all of your help as well. But today I'm here to discuss and this resource will be available to you all through the link in the video as well. But let's hear out from Dr. Brown. What was the inspiration behind it? What were the pain points that made her create some of these things as well? So Dr. Brown, tell us your story about how it came about.
Well, I worked with other agricultural specialists at Iowa State University, beef, all livestock, economics, crops, and pathology, entomology, insects, and so forth. So along back in the 2000s, we always had to make an annual report to the federal government about what we accomplished, what each of these teams accomplished. And the teams were not used to doing any kind of evaluation, true evaluation. They would report how many meetings they had, how many people came to the meetings, but they never were held accountable for what those people did with the knowledge that they gained. And so that was a different requirement for all of them. And these were people who were in the field working with farmers, just as I was, and they were not necessarily academically oriented. They were much more practically oriented. So I had to think of a way to educate them on the kinds of questions they needed to ask so that they could find the impact of what they were doing in the field, not just counting numbers or people. They had to show what these people did as a result of what they learned or the research that was transmitted to them. So that is really the background of why I developed this Likert scale that's so practical to use. That we also, of course, I looked at the kinds of questions to ask. and how to ask questions. Such, for example, you don't ask yes or no questions because you don't get any information from that. You have to ask questions of how or what, so you can get some meat for the questions, for the responses. And so these kinds of evaluation measurements then were more measurable than just a yes or no. So that was really the background of what this whole Likert questionnaire was. And I did the extent of it, it's quite detailed, as Dr. Heshup showed, so that there were choices that the field specialists could make as I helped them develop their questions. They would tell me, well, this is what I really want to know. Whether they did anything, whether they agree with something, how often they did something that we taught them. So those were measurable outcomes that they could report on. And that was the whole basis of this, is to give them tools so that they could write meaningful impact reporting. That pretty much sums it up.
That is so fascinating, Dr. Brown. Audience, just to let you know that you come from agriculture background, and I end up using these some of these resources in recently surveys, and that's what caught my attention, that these resources, education doesn't have to be confined in medical field and clinical research. I'm always looking for these resources, and I end up finding something from Dr. Brown.
They're neutral as far as discipline.
Exactly. And it was done 13 years ago. I could not find any better resource than this, than you. And when I reached out to Dr. Brown, she said, I'm retired now. I don't have any updated version, but we invited her to come and talk to her. So Dr. Brown, tell us about the stories. Like people have reached out to you. I'm not the first one. So what can you share? Some fun story or somebody over the years since you retired? You were too young to retire, by the way, but congratulations for your retirement. Tell us something, how many people or how much people have reached out to you.
Well, I find that fascinating. And I really, I didn't post these various documents on Facebook or any social media per se. I put them on academic sites or areas. And so I'm really fascinated with how individuals have come back to me, and I have retained my Iowa State email address, and that's how they reach me. So most of the background is in agriculture, because they can see that I was in agriculture, but as Dr. Heshup shows, that some other areas have reached out to me too, because the survey instruments that I've developed are, they can be applied to other disciplines. So yes, other sometimes graduate students who are doing work, and sometimes operatives that are still in the field. That have asked if sometimes they simply ask permission to use the document. And because I was part of Iowa State University Extension, which is a public service arm of a research institution, whatever I produced is for the public and it's not copyrighted. So that's why I certainly gave people permission to use it. Without changing it, of course.
Absolutely. This is important. And I think the point you mentioned is that it's important that resources could be utilized from anywhere else. And then you retaining your email for alumni, that is so important. If you have an email and if you're graduating from your college or your medical school or your graduate school, those emails follow you. So I think you did the right thing. Otherwise, there's no way we'll be able to contact you if the email ID would not work. in this regard. So that's a very good point as well. Dr.
I
Brown,
have a feeling after this, I may be getting more requests.
that could be for sure, and let us know if that causes any problems to your retired life. Uh,
No.
I'm going to switch gears and maybe ask a couple of fun questions. I don't know if for our audience, usually we ask our interviewees saying, can you share something fun about you, like that not very many people know? Of course, we don't share anything private you don't want to be shared, but anything fun about or unusual which people would not guess.
Yes, well, I guess an unusual thing is that when I came to Iowa, I started training for scuba diving. Now, here, Iowa is in the heart of the country, and there is no open water anywhere close to us, except perhaps Lake Superior, which is not conducive to pleasant diving. So yes, I took up scuba diving and have been to quite a few places around the world diving in past decades, in extraordinary places. And the background of my video here is a shot of Tulum, Mexico, Yucatan, Mexico, just south of Cancun. So if I move over a little bit, you can see the old Mayan fortress that was built. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I took scuba diving lessons and got certified and started diving out of Iowa, not in Iowa.
That is so amazing. I've never done scuba diving, but that's on my bucket list to do at some point of time. So I'm so glad that you're sharing that. Before I let you go,
I'm very pleased, that I was able to do it back in the 80s and 90s, and before climate change has started having such a devastating effect on our environment, including the oceans.
I'm so glad that you're bringing it up because yes, I'm so glad that you're bringing it up because that is such an important part and raising awareness about it. Today, at the day of recording of this video, both of us are talking about that this is one of the hottest day here, like 95 degrees where we are, both of us in a different states.
It is, yes, it is here, but it's also in the oceans. That I just saw a report that the oceans off the coast of Florida have reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes.
And
so
that's killing the corals.
Yes, that's an urgency. So all of us can do our part in there as well. Before I let you go, I have a question for you. What wisdom you would have to share with others who are still in the workforce, looking at the retirement in 10, 20 years down the lane as well? What advice you can give them now? You have served in full capacity and you're really earned your retirement part of it. What will be one advice you'll give it to people who are getting towards there?
To stay connected to your network of people. When people retire, oftentimes they don't have a plan or an outline of, other than saying, well, I want to travel more. But what I have found is that connecting with the people you care about and that are important to you, whether that's friends or family, is probably the most important aspect of retirement, to make it a pleasant and something to look forward to.
Nicely said. Very wise advice. I think the networking is important during the work times and things like that, but staying connected, that makes us young, and then that makes us connected. That makes us a social person for that matter. Dr. Brown, it's an absolute pleasure. Even for brief time, we could get some of your time as well, sharing the story behind you making that document of different Likert scales. Coming from agriculture background in 13 years ago as of today at the time of recording this video, and then sharing the story behind, and then being open to sharing for the coming generations, grad students, medical students, residents, fellows, and faculty members, special and clinical research area. So I thank you on behalf of all the research community. I thank you for your time, and we are so glad that you could come and join us today.
Thank you. I appreciate your interest.